All right. So, I'm going to give you 3 steps today to change whatever it is that you want. Matter of fact, 3 steps to letting go. And in that letting go, there's change that happens. So if there's something that you want to change, I can guarantee you that there's going to be something that you're going to have to let go of. That's just the truth. You're going to have to create space for that thing to change, for that thing to enter into your life, whether it's a new relationship, whether it's a new career, it doesn't matter. So you're going to have to learn how to change, how to let go. And these are 3 steps for you to learn how to do that. Step 1 is acknowledgement. Step 1 is acknowledgement. And it's acknowledging that we need to change, or acknowledging this pattern that we may have about ourselves. Or something about ourselves that needs to change, or, maybe we need to let go of a relationship, whether it's a relationship to chips, whether it's a relationship to a significant other, whether it doesn't matter what it is, but it's the coming into the acknowledgement that this needs to change. And step 1 about acknowledgement is that it takes some time sometimes to really come into this acknowledgement. And the reason is just because we simply don't want to change. It's just it's natural for everything to change, but the way we've been conditioned and wired is to hold on and to resist change. Another conversation for another time, but as to why that is. But nevertheless, this is how we've been conditioned. And so because of that, because of resisting change, by holding on, whatever that looks like, there's pain that comes with that. There's pain that comes with holding on, with not being able to embrace change. And so in order to acknowledge that something about ourselves or something else needs to change, there's usually a lot of significant pain that comes with that, depending on, how important it is that this thing ought to be changed. And so that's step 1. Step 2 is relinquishing the judgment around that thing, and coming into acceptance of what is. Just, what? I, for example, have a pattern of needing to be heard sometimes, right? And so at some level, we all have something that needs to change, something that we discover about ourselves that, let's say, isn't necessarily giving us the best results. Maybe somebody has a pattern of drinking and they recognize, okay, well, my family is now afraid of me. I'm drinking every day. My health's going down the hole, and my kids are starting to become afraid of me, and I'm getting really angry. And it's taken me, let's say, 6 months or 60 years to acknowledge this, right? So there's a process of acknowledgement and all the pain that we cause on ourselves and others as a result. But now it's like you come into that realization, oh my God, what have I done? And so then there's this painful acknowledgement of what it really is. And so the step 2 would be coming into acceptance of this. Coming into acceptance that, what? I have done this, and not judging ourselves for it, not having guilt for it, not having shame around it, not being angry about it, beating ourselves up, beating someone else up, projecting our anger, acting out on the anger, acting out on the guilt, and going to drink more. Whatever those negative feelings are, those need to be processed out of our system. And this is so incredibly important, because until we can actually let go of the resistance to what is, and let go of the judgment around what it is, that a pattern that we might have, then that thing is not going to change, because our very resistance to it is there's no space there. There's no love there. There's no wiggle room. There's no flexibility there. And so every time, if we have those feelings of guilt, and using this example of drinking too much and just sabotaging a lot of things that we value, then what's going to happen is, if we don't process that guilt out, it's going to hook us right back in. It's going to hook us right back into that pattern. And it's very possible that those feelings of guilt is what created that pattern in the first place. So looking at step 2 of acceptance, and this is where most of us have, we don't have the higher education, we don't have the modality, we don't have a system, a process to responsibly process out our feelings. And this is what we are now being ushered into as a collective right now. This is what many of us are starting to get a hold of in the transformational space and in the transformational community, is we're starting to learn about this thing called the subconscious and the feelings and the emotions that have been stuck inside our field of consciousness since, well, let's just say childhood or even a very long time, hence the inner child work that comes in that you may have heard about. But without getting too complicated, just to keep things simple, you've got to find a way to process out those feelings. There's a few different, there's obviously many modalities out there. I'd highly encourage you to find a modality or a system or a process to process out your feelings responsibly. Get yourself the education, learn about this, and find yourself a coach, find yourself a mentor, find someone, a guide who can help you not only learn about this, but can facilitate you so that you can over time, you can start to experience what that's like to be just your organic self, your organic human that's connected to your emotions, that allows things to flow through you. And the reason why that we've many times why we don't do this is because in the beginning of life right now, like when you're born, our parents didn't have the education, so we get taught what they taught, right? And we believe that our feelings are who we are. And that's simply just not true. And so that's why there's a large avoidance around feeling our feelings of guilt, shame, and what have you. Because if I feel guilt and shame and all these things, then what? I'm weak? Or then what, right? Like, oh my God, God forbid, please nobody see me like this because I am someone. I gotta hold my identity. You know what I mean? And so that's where the ego comes in, is not allowing ourselves to be human, not allowing ourselves to feel our emotions, and then we become a shell of a person. So, the shell of who we are, really, because who we really are is our soul. It's our soul. That's who we really are. So, to come back, first step is acknowledgement of what is. Second is coming into acceptance and processing the feelings out around what is happening and what has happened. And the third step is to then start chunking things down. Gosh, I gotta tell you, and this is something that this is something that not only have I seen in my other clients and clientele and people that I've helped and served to this point, but it's something that I really struggled with for a long time, and I'm still working through my own practice with it. But chunking things down, that's step 3. You've got to be able to chunk things down. What that looks like is, let's say you have a pattern of drinking for 6 years, every day. And now it's dawned on you this needs to change. And, you've done your best and processed out whatever feelings that you have around this whole thing that maybe started the pattern in the first place, and that's keeping you hooked into the pattern, right? And so you're processing out the feelings, but what a lot of people want to do is they see what happened and they're just like, F this stuff, we're just going to kill it. I'm going to quit cold turkey. And sometimes that works for some people. But 9 times out of 10, when that happens, it usually ends up finding an addiction to someone else or something else. And it doesn't really get processed because those emotions haven't been processed completely. And the reason why I can say that the emotions haven't been processed completely, if you quit cold turkey, is because it takes time to process out those emotions. 6 layers of stuff and guilt, let's just say as the example from drinking, you can't just quit cold turkey and expect yourself to be in the same place, or expect yourself to have processed out the problem that caused that type of dysfunctional relationship in the first place. In other words, you haven't really changed. You may have looked like you've changed because you've quit a pattern, but you as you are, you haven't healed, you haven't changed. And so that's the first example and kind of illustration on, chunking things down and what it might look like for someone who quits cold turkey and what's really happening underneath, right? Now, the other person who tries to quit cold turkey and it doesn't work, and the reason why it doesn't work is because it's just too much too quick. Because it takes time to process out those emotions. All of that has to work through your nervous system. It takes time to process that energy out of your system, out of your field of consciousness. And so with that, what happens is typically they get hooked back into the pattern. But a lot of times what can happen is it's that pattern of extremism that now happens because that's so you've been drinking for 6 years, you decide to stop cold turkey. That's extreme. That's very extreme. And that is really out of judgment, so to speak. It's because at the end of the day, it's just not healthy to do something like that. Why? Because you put yourself at risk. I mean, if somebody's been drinking, just looking at this particular example, if you've been drinking for 6 years and you're an alcoholic and you try to quit cold turkey, you can go through withdrawals. You can really hurt yourself like that. And that's how it is with all these different things. Just like when somebody does a cleanse or they decide to fast, if they've been eating processed foods their whole life and then you try to get them to go on a 6-day water fast before they've even, cleared out and taken it step by step, you can really hurt yourself. And so that's basically what starts to happen emotionally speaking when we don't process out these emotions and chunk it down and we try to go and do all this extremism. You can really psych yourself up. You can really, put yourself in a state of even psychosis depending on your past and what it is that you've gone through personally and what your traumas are. You can literally start to believe that you're reliving certain past experiences when that's not actually what's happening. So chunking things down is really important towards success because each time that let's say you're eating 4 bowls of cereal in the morning, instead of eating 4 bowls and trying to go down to 1 or trying to cut cereal out altogether, how honoring is that of you and where you're at in this part of you and all these feelings, right? So it's like, instead of cutting it down from 4 and going to none or even 4 to 1, go down to 3. And then maybe the next day go up to 4. And then go back to 3. Like we got to chunk this down. And that's the main thing. That's the main thing when it comes to being well, it's not the main thing, but it is certainly, a piece that I think everyone needs to work on, that many people need to work on, that, just needs to take a shift in our mentality and our strategy towards these things. And the reason is because of that emotional element that I just spoke of in step 2, because it takes time to process those things out. So 3 steps: acknowledgement of what is. Number 2 is acceptance of what it is that you just acknowledged, coming to an acceptance, letting go of resistance around what is, right? Relinquishing the judgment, relinquishing the fear, processing all that out of your system, which takes time. And then because of that, and that element of it taking time and honoring your emotions and healing, all of that is a process. It comes to step 3. You want to chunk things down. So that's really what it is. It's at the end of the day, it sounds simple, and there's a lot of steps in those 3 steps. There's a lot of journey that happens. There's a lot of things that happen, but ultimately those are 3 solid things and really hardcore golden nugget tips that you can take with you, and hopefully, you don't have to go through so much pain to get to step 1. Hopefully you follow your intuition and you acknowledge what it is that you feel isn't right. And when you feel that idea of letting go, that you don't hook yourself in further and make it harder on yourself, and that makes things a lot easier to change. But again, all of that is really dependent upon how resolved you are in listening to your intuition or the nudges from your soul to let something go. And it also has to do with how much you've healed, how much control you have over your emotional state. And that's your ability to process your own emotions, to feel your emotions, to honor your emotions, and learn the lesson behind those emotions. That's all part of step 2 with that modality, with that system. And then finally, step 3, which is chunking it down and creating a really solid strategy. And, again, find that modality, find that coach, and start integrating these 3 steps in your life and embrace change.